Hi. So my name is Meghna. I'm an assistant professor at College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, Mumbai, and I've titled my presentation "The Forever Wars" because I believe that these are not wars but fault lines in the world that we live in. So let's take a quick look at the two photos I have in me. On your right is the current map of India, but what you see on the left is uh, somewhere a medieval representation of India, the subcontinent, not the country. So you see Pakistan and Afghanistan are also a part of it, a substantial amount of Nepal and, the Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka as well. This is what we call as Akhand Bharat, a somewhat mythical concept of the socio-economic superiority that India enjoyed at a point of time in history. Now, if we take a look at the current conflicts, whether it is Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Palestine, both of them are based on this similar theme that Russia used to be a large land of which Ukraine and Crimea both were a part, that is the USSR. Israel, of course, believes that it is the Holy Land for the Jews, whereas Palestinians are the encroachers and therefore they have to be removed not just from the Gaza Strip but from existence to a certain extent. So all these military actions are considered rooted in what is generally a myth or a theme which is not always very closely connected to history. Another thing is we don't usually call them a war outright nowadays. We call it demilitarization, denazification, de-radicalization, again, military action, response to terror attacks, etc. This is a method, this is a strategy of optics that tells us that no, we are not actual aggressors. We are just responding to something which was done to us. So we are not the initiators of the action. We are just responding to protect our own interests. Another interesting thing that we observe here is that the wars today are not fought with ammunition, but with media. It is not so much a war between countries and people, it is a war between realities, your reality and my reality. For example, Russia says we are trying to denazify Ukraine, it is a military action. Ukraine, on the other hand, is using all its resources, it is, all its might, it is trying to stay stable. So, but people perceive this as two very different things. Some will obviously support Russia, others will doubt Putin's mental health. So, this brings us to the next point is that in these actions, because my reality is not yours, we are willing to go to any extent to hurt the other person and all the people related to the other person. For example, President Zelensky, when he came to the White House, one of the silliest questions asked to him was, why are you not wearing a suit in the highest administrative office of the country that you are a guest for? Conveniently forgetting that for the past 2.5 years, his country has been at war defending itself with a giant that is Russia. So, suitable attire is not really the point of priority right here. So, another tendency that we see is that wherever there are natural resources, there is conflict. And whenever Putin's popularity declines, he will wage war, pretty much like what Bibi has done. Bibi, as we know, is Israel's prime minister. So, and the question that arises now is Israel is being supported by the US in terms of military and financial aid, whereas the same has been withdrawn from Ukraine. So, if India as a country has strategic, not so friendly neighbors like Pakistan and China, how are we going to handle these forever wars in the future? For example, India is a Hindu majority country, Pakistan is a Muslim majority country. That fault line is never going to change. So, what we need to do, at least in the next 5 to 10 years, is increase our self reliance in terms of economic ability, increase exports, reduce imports, especially from China, have indigenous military technology, which is crucial for our defense, and also innovate in terms of technology and have a very fine, soft power based balance between our allies. There was a time when Russia was closer to us than the US, but and we were able to maintain our relationships with them separately, independent of the conflict that the two had between them. So we were able to get our interests from Russia in terms of access to oil and also some amount of diplomatic leverage with the US. The biggest point right now is strengthening the Indian media and teach and reminding it, not teaching, reminding it to speak truth to power. Certain aspects, such as the Prime Minister's foreign visits and his religious activities, are so emphasized in the media that it has forgotten to deal with basics such as investigation and fact checking. So, just a reminder that this photo you see is Pablo Escobar, half his face and half of Netanyahu's face. And this is an example of optics that people understand that Putin is manipulating us by saying that this is a war. It is his war, not Russia's, and definitely not the Russian people's. So people are, seeing through this haze. It just takes a little more time. I'd just like to play this quick ad as this is a very old ad, about 10 years old, but it is something that has gained credence. Uh, can you uh, can you see this?
No, I think it doesn't work.
Only black screen.
Maybe you have to show your browser. Meghna, we don't see it. I think it's in your browser, and we only see the sort of a gray screen.
So, one of the things that we realized in India is that because we have such a diversity of culture, whenever there are events which are a culmination of uh, predecessing events, such as riots. Riots, people often misunderstand them as something that happened on the spur of the moment. But communal riots are something that have been simmering under the lid of the pot for a long time. And after a particularly serious incident of rioting in Mumbai, the college started a field action project known as Salokha, which is a Hindi word for brotherhood. So we understood by talking to the people after the riots that they had a lot of myths and misconceptions about people from the other religion, about their food practices, about their clothing, about their marriages. So we understood that we needed to have a project where we would not help people judge the other group, and something where there would not be too much fighting, rather there would be a little bit of reflection, because they need to understand that they cannot be manipulated by political powers. They have to take control of their own lives, not just politically, but also economically and in terms of religion, which ideally should be a personal belief and practice. Of course, it cannot be something which is very moral in its tone, because unless you talk about your own fears and ideas, your mind and opinion will not change. So, reflection and consolidation was an important part of our project. So we formed community-based groups in various communally sensitive parts of the city. We had groups where people, especially the youth and women, they tried to understand their self-concepts, how attitudes are produced, how biases are acquired, what are the other parties, the other religions' basic beliefs. How do we analyze riots? For example, where do the riots take place? Which are the pockets? What is the socio-economic status of the people who are affected? Who are the aggressors? How does the police respond? how do we look back at previous riots? How does rioting affect industry, commerce? Like, because Mumbai is a stronghold of medium and small enterprises, how would that be impacted? The entire idea was whatever not so politically correct ideas, fears, beliefs you may had about your own or other religions, this would be a space to discuss them openly. For example, there are very strong myths in India, even currently, about the diet of particular religions. So, people who eat particular animals versus people who are vegetarians. So things can get pretty heated up saying, you do this, no, we don't do that, you do that. So better vent out all your fears and anxieties in that particular group rather than wait for it to simmer and then, hate not just persons individually of that group, but hate that entire group as a plural. So originally, as I said, I had titled this as this presentation as a forever war because these fault lines are part of our identity. Religion especially gives us a very primordial identity which we would not change under most circumstances. So if religion is here to stay, especially in a country like India, which considers spirituality as its, one of its roots, religion is very strongly present and is supported by culture universally in our country. So if that is going to stay, then we need an open, safe space for people to discuss religion equally. About how different religious people have access to different resources, how they have separate social status, economic and social capital, etc. Because fear comes from lack of knowledge. And lack of knowledge and lack of familiarity with the other group is something that is most important. The more familiar you become with the other group, the more you will realize that they are just like you. People of all religions want the same thing. They want their children to have a happier, healthier, richer, better life than they have. So if you start looking for difference, that's what you'll find. But if you start looking for similarities, we'll end up realizing that we are all the same. Whether it's in spite of skin color, in spite of food, clothing, ideas, and values. So broadly, I think there are just two ways of looking at the armed conflict right now, which are these. Catherine the Great wanted an empire so large that it would
Please,
be
Meghna,
almost uncontrollable. But Ukraine today has shown that whether it is with Germany's help or even on its own, it has survived Russia's attack. And now Russia is a huge oligarch. So surviving Russia tells us that might is not always right, that force will be defeated by resolve. So if these are the two poles that the universe is going to be based on, we need to decide which side we are going to be. And as they say, flexibility is always a greater benefit than strength. So I personally belong to the right side of the box. And it's like as the advertisement we saw, it is also a lot about optics. Putin has lost the optics war, but with US's support to Russia in terms of trying to remove all the sanctions and withdrawing military aid to Ukraine, Ukraine could lose also because hugging Zelensky at the London Security Conference is one thing, but actually giving money and political support to Ukraine over the long term is another thing altogether. The European
Meghna,
community has
Meghna,
now a once in a generation chance to rival America as the democratic leader of the free world.
Meghna,
We will
Meghna,
need some more time to see how it is.
Meghna.